In today's journey, we are making a Cabernet Sauvignon from fresh juice that we got from Adventures in Home Brewing, not sponsored content. And despite the fact that this is a higher quality way to make wine, it's stupidly easy. They already come pre-pitched with yeast, balanced for pH, and ready to go. Just put the bucket in a 70-degree room and let the built-in airlock take care of the first phase of fermentation for you. Although that's all you have to do, there are some things you can do to make it better, such as transferring it to a 6-gallon carboy so that you get a chance to actually mix everything back up that may have settled while it was being shipped to Adventures, as any sugars that have settled out may not ferment in the final product. This also gives you a chance to get a starting gravity reading. And with that, after doing your transfer by siphon, funnel, or leaving it in the bucket, you're done for the day as it comes pre-pitched and is ready to ferment. The only real downside to these kinds of kits is that they're seasonal and are only available at certain times of the year. Once the bubbling slows down, you'll want to start taking a hydrometer reading about once every 2 days. Our target is to move the wine before it's finished fermenting but is almost completely done, at about 10:10 on your gravity readings. This will take approximately 3 weeks, but the hydrometer is what will tell you when you are ready to move on to the next step. Some instructions will say to mix at this point, however we did not. Don't know why we skipped it in the moment, but we kinda wish we had. At this moment, Phil's going to prepare to do a hydrometer reading to make sure we're ready to go. But at this point, we're going to mention that everything that touches the juice should be sanitized and cleaned beforehand. We too often assume that people should know this, but we feel that we should mention it from time to time as this could ruin everything for a first timer. And because what we do is a little over the top, we don't like to show that part in most of the videos. Plus it gets a little redundant. And if this is your first time doing a wine kit, we recommend making sure that you have the taller of the sample jars and are ready to take at least 2 drawings from the wine to take a proper sample. As when we do this test, the hydrometer is going to have to go down almost all the way. And if you don't have a large enough sample or a vessel that can hold it, your hydrometer may bottom out. You may be tempted to skip doing hydrometer readings, but they are important, as if not properly done, you will have troubles clarifying later. You may not have fermented all the way and that the bubbling stopping was that the yeast stalled out, or other issues that could be going on in the wine, which is why we recommend to taste it at this time as well. Just remember that while tasting it, it's not the final product yet, so if it's not perfect, don't give it too much trouble. Let it mature. But if it were to say taste sour or other off flavors, you know something has gone wrong. Another reason why we at least recommend opening the bucket on the first day to make sure that something didn't go wrong before you even started. Odds are low as these are produced by professionals, but it never hurts to make sure. Just like it never hurts to use a carboy dryer to drain your carboys upside down to make sure the sanitizer drains out completely. However, we don't fear the foam from Star San. Feel free to use whatever transfer method you like at this point, except for by funnel, as that would introduce a lot of oxygen at this point, which is really bad for the final product as it would cause oxidation flavors when it reacts with the alcohol. Our transfer today is not only going faster because of time manipulation, but also because we're using a 1/2-inch auto siphon instead of a 3/8. These are great for experienced brewers and vintners as it makes the transfer happen a lot faster. However, it gives you less time to react if something were to start to go wrong, such as losing suction because you're not paying attention. Fortunately, it's very close to the bottom, but there could have been more that went over to the next vessel. Oh well. Samples for the night. This is where you will hear people say, fill to 1 inch from the cap or bung. This means that they want you to have as little of airspace as possible in there, while still having a little bit for the CO2 to come out of liquid. If you have too much, the easy solution is just to put the remaining in the bucket into a wine bottle to save for later. Or just drink it right away. Or if you have too little, you can fill the extra space with a like wine or use glass marbles that have been sanitized. Cap with an airlock and then return to your fermentation area. After at least 5 weeks of holding the temperature at 70 degrees Fahrenheit, we get ready to move on to the clarification and stabilization process. And this is where there being a lot of different ways to do the same thing really starts to show. We like to do the transfer to the new vessel before we add the adjuncts that are going to do the clarification and stabilization of our wine. And this is for one very important reason that is ultra important. We don't want Phil to degas in the wrong carboy. This would reroute some of the sediment that's already fallen out, and therefore undoing some of the clarification that's already happened. As Phil is about to demonstrate, disaster can strike at any moment, so it is always important to have a plan to clean up any mess, as this red wine will definitely stain anything that is stainable. Our studio is not. We now move on to stabilizing. First, with a 1/4 teaspoon of potassium metabisulfite. This will remove any free oxygen and help prevent the wine from changing color as it ages. But this won't work alone, as it needs its partner, potassium sorbate, to finish the job off. The potassium metabisulfite kills the current yeast by getting rid of all the oxygen available, whereas the sorbate will prevent any surviving yeast from being able to multiply or reproduce in the future. And once we give this a thorough mixing / degassing, no yeast should be left living in the next couple of days. Any that do survive, of course, can't reproduce, so we're going to let this sit for a while during clarification anyways. At the end of that period, all yeast should be completely dead. But speaking of the clarification process, we will be using 150 milliliters of chitosan. If you have a shellfish allergy, you may wish to skip this part, or if you're making vegan wine, you may want to use something else, such as bentonite. Generally, the same effect is the same, where it will increase the flocculation of the yeast and attract anything else that's floating around in there and causing it to drop out of solution. This will be evident by the amount of crud that will start to form at the bottom of the fermenter. Now, other than taking this opportunity to do some degassing, we're pretty much done for clarifying and stabilizing for the day. This is where a more professional winemaker would either top off with a light wine or add glass marbles to raise the level to about 1 inch from the airlock again. We won't be doing that, as we like to keep it business casual. Although we will be keeping this at a different fermentation temperature from earlier. If you're following along with us with a red wine, you will want to keep it at about 55 to 60 degrees Fahrenheit. However, if you went with the white variety, we recommend going with 50 to 55 degrees Fahrenheit instead, along with using isinglass instead of chitosan. Alright, here we are, the final day, bottling. If you have any experience with wine kits or anything with beer or anything beforehand, you pretty much know exactly what to do already. The most important things to always remember though is make sure everything's sanitized, that the valve is closed before you start filling the vessel, and that you're ready to do everything the slow and patient way. It would be such a shame to make it this far just to make a simple mistake that ruins everything. We generally recommend using the tried and true bucket method, as bottling directly from a racking cane has really never been our cup of tea, especially when it gets down towards the bottom parts. Another thing you will want to be mindful of is not disturbing any of the sediment at the bottom or causing any excess splashing or agitation that will introduce any oxygen this late in the game. Those of the more hoity-toity variety would probably prefer to use a filter system at this point that often has a pump that would transfer the wine from one vessel to the other while simultaneously filtering it through pads. Although we may seem to be that type, we just can't afford a system like that at this point. Maybe someday when Phil's older. And for the sake of the rest of the bottles, we often don't try to get the last drop out just to prevent any chance of there being excess sediment transferred over. If we find that too much wine has been left over in the carboy, we will use a funnel and pour it into a wine bottle for our less favorite friends, or to break open in case of emergencies. Meaning, it's fine, it's just not worth ruining the other bottles over it. And with that, we're basically done, other than the actual bottling itself. It would probably be important to point out at this point that the one thing that this juice hasn't been done for you ahead of time, like a wine expert, is that it hasn't been aged at all. So while this wine is ready to drink and will taste fine, letting it age for a month or two wouldn't hurt anything either. Also, if your timelines aren't matching up to ours, that's fine. Every wine is going to be a little different, even from season to season and variety to variety. If you have any questions or concerns, don't hesitate to ask us or your local homebrew supply shop. Always remember that we are here to help you, except for when it comes to showing you how to do the actual bottling today. Sorry. Check out this other video down in the description that will show you how to do the bottling. Unfortunately, we just don't have the capacity to show you how we do bottling on a 6-gallon kit in our current studio setup, but maybe someday when we're a bit older. However, we will give you at least one tip. We highly recommend using the 3/8 bottling wand instead of the 1/2 inch, as the 3/8 hose fits onto the bottling spigot a bit better. And with that, all we have left to say is, happy venting! Along with, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And you know what? Just for those people who are going to put a comment down below just to be that guy, here's Phil doing some of the bottling on camera for you, just so that you can see what it looks like. But do check out the other video, as we were able to set up a 1 gallon setup to do an actual bottling demo properly.